Hi, I'm Stewart Ryan, a partner at Laffey, Bucci, Reich and Ryan. Before I joined this firm, I spent years as a prosecutor working with survivors of violent crime. I saw firsthand how overwhelming the justice system can feel, especially for people already carrying the weight of trauma. I also saw the struggle that many survivors endure even after a criminal prosecution is completed, and how many people did not realize all of the paths for healing that are available to them, like the civil justice system. That's why I wrote the Pennsylvania Crime Survivors Handbook, to help survivors and their families understand what to expect, what their rights are, and how to navigate both the criminal and civil justice systems. In this series, I'll walk you through each chapter of the book. We'll talk about the process, the people involved, and the protections available to you in clear, honest terms. Because justice isn't just about punishment. It's about empowerment, understanding, and healing. When someone becomes the victim of a crime, their life changes in an instant. What follows can feel just as overwhelming. The process is filled with legal terms, procedures, and people making decisions that affect you, sometimes without clear explanation. The criminal justice system is designed to protect the community, including survivors, and hold offenders accountable. It operates in stages, each with its own purpose and each carried out by different people who serve distinct roles. It usually begins with law enforcement. Police or detectives investigate a crime, gather evidence, and interview witnesses. Their goal is to establish what happened and identify a suspect. Once they have enough evidence, they usually submit the case to a prosecutor's office for review. The prosecutor often decides whether the criminal charges should be filed. This decision is based on the strength of the evidence and the likelihood of proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt. Once a suspect is charged, the prosecution begins in the local magisterial district court, where a preliminary hearing is held. A preliminary hearing determines whether there is enough evidence for the case to proceed to trial. After that, the case moves to the Court of Common Pleas, where trials take place. Throughout this process, the defendant, meaning the person accused of the crime, has rights guaranteed by the Constitution. They are presumed innocent until proven guilty. At the same time, you, as the survivor, also have important rights under Pennsylvania law, such as the right to be notified of hearings, to attend proceedings, and to give a victim impact statement if there is a conviction. You have the right to be assisted by a victim advocate, and you also have the right to have your own lawyer to guide you through the process. The criminal justice process can take time. While no legal process can undo what happened, it can bring accountability and the chance for closure. You are not just a witness in this process. You are a participant. Your story matters. Your rights matter. And your voice deserves to be part of what justice looks like. The criminal justice system can feel like a long road with a lot of stops along the way. Each stage has its own purpose. Understanding that process can help you know what to expect and how to protect your rights. It begins when a crime is reported. Law enforcement responds, gathers information, and starts an investigation. Their job is to find out what happened, identify the person responsible, and collect evidence that supports the case. That evidence might include witness statements, photographs, videos, or forensic testing. Once investigators have enough information, they usually submit their findings to the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor reviews the case and decides whether there is enough evidence to move forward with criminal charges. If the evidence supports it, charges are filed, and the person accused of the crime becomes the defendant. The first step in court is usually the preliminary arraignment, where the defendant is told what they are being charged with. The next stage is the preliminary hearing, where the judge decides if there is enough evidence for the case to go to trial. If there is, the case moves to the Court of Common Pleas. From there, the case can take several different paths. Some cases resolve through plea agreements, where the defendant admits guilt in exchange for a certain sentence. Other cases go to trial, where a jury or a judge decides guilt or innocence based on the evidence presented. If the defendant is found guilty, The next step is sentencing. The judge decides what punishment is appropriate based on the seriousness of the crime, the harm caused, and any prior criminal record. Sentencing can include jail or prison time, probation, restitution to the victim, or other conditions. After sentencing, there may still be additional proceedings. The defendant can file appeals, and survivors may have rights related to parole hearings or notification of release. It can be difficult when it feels like the process continues long after the verdict, but every stage serves to protect fairness and accountability. As a survivor, you have rights throughout this process. You have the right to be notified about hearings, to attend court proceedings, and to speak about how the crime has affected you. You are not just a bystander to what happens. You are part of this process, and your participation matters. While every case is different, the foundation remains the same. The system is designed to seek truth, protect rights, and deliver justice. When a crime happens, it can sometimes feel like everything that follows is focused on the defendant. You hear about their rights, their hearings, and their lawyer, and it can feel like your role fades into the background. But that is not how it should be. In Pennsylvania, survivors have important legal rights that ensure they are treated with fairness, dignity, and respect. The Crime Victim Bill of Rights was created to protect those rights. It guarantees that victims have access to information, participation, and support throughout the entire criminal justice process. These rights are not favors or privileges. They are the law. You have the right to be told about major events in the case, and that includes court hearings, plea deals, sentencing, and any release or escape of the offender. This notice allows you to be prepared and to make informed choices about your safety and involvement. You have the right to attend court proceedings. Your presence shows the judge and jury that this crime had a real impact on a real person. In many cases, you also have the right to speak directly to the judge during sentencing. This is called a victim impact statement, and it gives you the opportunity to describe how the crime affected your life, your family, and your sense of safety. Victims also have the right to restitution, meaning the offender can be ordered to pay for financial losses that resulted from the crime. That might include medical bills, counseling costs, or property damage. Restitution is separate from any criminal fines or penalties and is meant to help make you whole financially from what happened. There are also services designed to support victims. The Victims' Compensation Assistance Program can provide reimbursement for expenses that are not covered by restitution, such as lost wages or funeral costs. Local victim advocates or an experienced attorney can help you apply for those benefits and guide you through the paperwork. You have the right to be treated with compassion by law enforcement, prosecutors, and the court system. You should never feel blamed, dismissed, or ignored. If your rights are not being honored, you have the right to raise that concern yourself through an advocate or by finding a qualified lawyer to assist you. The goal of the Crime Victims Bill of Rights is to make sure you are seen, heard, and respected. Justice does not just belong to the courts or the prosecutors. It also belongs to the community, including the people who have been harmed. These rights give you a voice in a process that can often feel impersonal, and they remind everyone involved that your experience matters. When a crime happens, it can feel like you are suddenly thrown into a system that speaks its own language. You start hearing about investigators, prosecutors, and courts, and it is not always clear who does what or where you can turn for help. The first contact most survivors have is with law enforcement. While their focus is on building a case, they are also required to treat victims with respect and to keep you informed about the progress of the investigation. The next step often involves the prosecutor's office, sometimes called the district attorney's office. The prosecutor represents the Commonwealth and decides whether to file charges. They prepare the case for court, present evidence, and speak on behalf of the people of Pennsylvania. But they also have a responsibility to victims. In most offices, there are victim witness coordinators who help you understand what to expect, explain your rights, and keep you updated on hearings or case developments. Victim advocates play a major role in connecting survivors with resources and support. Advocates are trained professionals who can explain the criminal process, accompany you to court, help prepare a victim impact statement, and assist with applications for restitution or compensation. Many advocates work within a prosecutor's office, but others are part of community-based organizations that provide counseling, emergency assistance, or shelter. It is important to remember that you are not expected to go through this process alone. Every survivor has the right to information, protection, and support. Asking questions, requesting updates, or reaching out for help are not signs of weakness or a bother. They are part of exercising your rights as a participant in the justice system. These programs and people exist because no one should have to face this process without guidance or compassion. When most people think about justice after a crime, they think about the criminal system, arrests, trials, and sentences. But there's another path that survivors can take, one that focuses not on punishment, but on accountability and recovery. That is the civil justice system. The civil system allows survivors to bring a lawsuit against the person or institution that caused or contributed to the harm. Unlike the criminal process, which is handled by the state, a civil case is filed by the survivor and their attorney. The goal is not to send someone to jail, but to seek financial compensation for the harm that was done, and to hold the responsible parties accountable in a court of law. Civil cases are separate from criminal cases, though they can arise from the same incident. For example, if someone is assaulted, the state may bring criminal charges against the offender. But the survivor can also bring a civil claim against that person for damages, such as medical bills, pain and suffering, or emotional distress. In some cases, civil claims are also brought against third parties whose negligence allowed the crime to happen. That might include a business that failed to provide adequate security, a landlord who ignored safety concerns, or a school or church that failed to protect those in its care. The standards of proof are different in civil court. In a criminal case, the prosecutor must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a very high standard. In a civil case, the survivor's attorney must prove the claim by a preponderance of the evidence, meaning that it is more likely than not that the defendant is responsible. This much lower standard allows survivors to pursue justice even if criminal charges were never filed or resulted in an acquittal. The outcome of a civil case is typically financial. A survivor can get a judgment or settlement to cover things like medical expenses, therapy costs, lost income, or other impacts of the trauma. While no amount of money can undo the harm, it can help survivors rebuild stability and access resources that promote healing. Another important difference is control. In a criminal case, the prosecutor makes decisions about how to proceed. In a civil case, the survivor, with their attorney, decides whether to file the lawsuit and whether to settle or go to trial. This gives survivors a level of control that is missing in the criminal process. Understanding the civil justice system is about recognizing that justice is not one-dimensional. Criminal courts determine guilt and punishment, but civil courts provide an avenue for accountability, independence, and the financial means to heal. Both systems exist to serve different parts of the same goal: to bring truth to light and help survivors move forward with strength and dignity. The civil justice system gives survivors a way to hold people and institutions accountable when their actions or negligence cause harm. It is a separate process from the criminal system and follows its own set of rules, deadlines, and procedures. Every civil case starts with a complaint. The complaint is a formal document filed by the survivor, who is called the plaintiff. It explains what happened, who is being sued, and what damages or relief the plaintiff is asking the court to provide. The person or organization being sued is the defendant, and once the complaint is filed, they are served with a copy and given time to respond. The defendant will file an answer, either admitting or denying the claims. Once that happens, the case moves into a phase called discovery. Discovery is the exchange of information between both sides. Attorneys gather documents, take depositions, and review evidence to prepare for trial. This stage can take time because each side is building its case and testing the strength of the other's evidence. During this process, both parties may participate in settlement discussions. A settlement is an agreement to resolve the case without going to trial. Many cases are resolved this way, allowing survivors to obtain compensation without the stress of testifying in court. If the case does not settle, it moves to trial. At trial, both sides present their evidence and witnesses before a judge or jury. If the survivor wins, the court can award damages for things like medical expenses, pain and suffering, emotional distress, and lost wages. After trial, either side can appeal if they believe there was a legal error that affected the outcome. It is important to know that civil cases can take time. They require patience and persistence, but the goal is to provide survivors with accountability and resources to help rebuild their lives. While every case is unique, understanding how the process works helps remove some of the uncertainty. It allows survivors to move forward with confidence, knowing that there is a clear path to seek truth and recovery. One of the most important concepts in the civil justice system is the statute of limitations. This is the legal deadline for filing a lawsuit. Once that period of time expires, you may lose the right to pursue your claim in court, no matter how strong the evidence is. The statute of limitations exists to promote fairness. Courts want cases to be filed when the evidence is still available and the witnesses' memories are fresh. But for survivors of violent crime, particularly sexual assault or abuse, those time limits can be complicated. Trauma can delay reporting, and it can take years for someone to feel ready to come forward. In Pennsylvania, the statute of limitations varies depending on the type of claim. For most personal injury cases, survivors have 2 years from the date of the injury to file a lawsuit. However, there are important exceptions. For survivors of childhood sexual abuse, the law has evolved. Victims may now have until age 55 to file a civil lawsuit against their abuser or an institution that allowed the abuse to occur. There have also been proposed changes to make a 2-year window of time to allow survivors of abuse to file a lawsuit regardless of how long ago it occurred. That window will allow people who were abused decades ago to finally seek justice. In some cases, the statute of limitations may be paused or extended under what is called the discovery rule. This rule applies when a person does not immediately realize that their injury or trauma was connected to someone else's wrongful conduct. Once the survivor discovers that connection, the clock begins to run. Because these rules can be complex, it is important to speak with an attorney as soon as possible. They can calculate the exact filing deadlines and make sure your rights are protected. Missing a statute of limitations can permanently close the door to civil recovery, even when there is clear evidence of wrongdoing. Understanding the statute of limitations is about more than dates on a calendar. It's about opportunity. It's about knowing that the law provides a path forward and that justice does not always expire with time. When someone commits a crime, it is easy to focus only on the person who caused the harm. But in many cases, there are others whose negligence or inaction made it possible for that crime to occur. In the civil justice system, those individuals or institutions can be held accountable. This is called third-party liability. It means that a person or organization that had a duty to protect you or to act responsibly failed to do so, and that failure contributed to the harm that you suffered. Holding those parties accountable is an important part of seeking justice because it recognizes that wrongdoing does not always happen in isolation. There are many examples of third-party liability. A property owner who fails to maintain proper lighting or security can be held responsible for an assault that happens on their property. A school or church that ignores warning signs of abuse can be liable for allowing a predator access to children. A company that fails to screen or supervise employees can be responsible if one of those employees commits an act of violence. To prove this type of case, attorneys look for evidence that shows negligence. That includes business records, policies, witness statements, and prior complaints that demonstrate the party knew or should have known about the danger and failed to take reasonable action. The goal is to show that if those responsible had done their job, the harm could have been prevented entirely. Liability is not about blaming everyone connected to a crime. It's about identifying the people or institutions whose actions or lack of action allowed the danger to exist. When those failures are exposed in court, it not only helps the survivor find justice, but also protects others from being hurt in the same way. Civil cases against third parties can lead to changes in policy, improved safety practices, and greater accountability. They send a clear message that ignoring risk or protecting reputation over safety is unacceptable. Civil law ensures that survivors do not have to carry the full weight of the harm alone, and that those in positions of power are reminded of their duty to protect. When a survivor decides to file a civil case, one of the first questions that often comes up is how compensation will actually be paid if the case is successful. In many situations, that answer involves insurance. Insurance coverage can play a major role in civil cases that arise from crime. Most people and businesses carry some type of insurance that is designed to protect them from financial loss caused by negligence. That coverage can also apply when their actions or inaction led to a crime that harmed someone else. For example, if an assault happens in an apartment complex where security was ignored, the property owner's insurance policy may cover claims related to negligent security. If an employer failed to supervise an employee who committed an assault, the company's liability insurance may apply. Even when the person directly responsible for the crime has no assets, an organization connected to the incident might have insurance that can provide financial recovery. Insurance coverage is not automatic. It depends on the type of policy, the wording of the policy, and the facts of the case. Some policies exclude intentional acts, while others may still provide coverage where negligence contributed to the harm. An attorney experienced in these cases will review the policies, identify all possible sources of coverage, and determine whether the insurance company has a legal duty to defend or pay on behalf of the defendant. In many cases, insurance companies will hire lawyers to represent their policyholders in civil court. Negotiations with insurers often happen during the settlement process. The insurer may agree to pay part or all of the settlement amount, depending on the strength of the case and the limits of the policy. Understanding insurance coverage is important because it helps survivors know what realistic compensation may look like. A judgment against a defendant who has no financial resources may be difficult to collect. But if an insurance policy applies, there is a viable path toward recovery. Insurance does not take away accountability. It is a tool that allows survivors to obtain financial support and stability after a traumatic event. And it ensures that those who failed to act responsibly are held to the standards they promised to meet when they obtained coverage. Justice in civil cases is about truth and accountability, but it is also about rebuilding. Insurance coverage is often one of the practical ways the law helps make that possible. Sexual abuse cases are among the most complex and sensitive matters in the justice system. They involve deep personal trauma, often committed by people in positions of trust or authority, and the harm they cause can last a lifetime. For survivors, the decision to come forward is rarely simple. It takes courage to speak about something so painful and to place that experience into a legal system that can feel intimidating. That is why understanding how these cases work, both criminally and civilly, is so important. In a criminal case, prosecutors bring charges against the offender on behalf of the Commonwealth. Their goal is to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt and to hold the offender accountable through punishment. The survivor's testimony is often central to the case, and prosecutors rely on careful investigation, forensic evidence, and witness statements to corroborate what happened. A civil case is different. It is filed by the survivor and focuses on accountability and recovery. The survivor can file a claim against the perpetrator directly, as well as against institutions or individuals whose negligence allowed the abuse to occur. That may include schools, churches, youth programs, or employers that ignored warning signs or failed to protect vulnerable people. Civil cases also have a lower burden of proof. The survivor must show only by a preponderance of the evidence that the abuse occurred and that the defendant was responsible. That means showing it is more likely than not that the events took place as described. This allows survivors to seek justice even when criminal charges are not filed or when the criminal case results in an acquittal. The law in Pennsylvania has evolved to give survivors more time and more options. For victims of childhood sexual abuse, the statute of limitations has been extended significantly, and legislation is creating opportunities for survivors whose claims were once barred by time limits to finally come forward. These changes reflect a growing understanding of trauma and how long it can take for someone to process and disclose abuse. In both systems, survivors have rights. They have the right to be treated with respect, to be heard, and to receive support. Attorneys and advocates who specialize in these cases can help survivors understand their options and take steps at their own pace. Sexual abuse cases are about truth and accountability, but they are also about healing. Every survivor's story matters. Coming forward not only helps in the pursuit of justice, but also helps prevent others from being harmed in the future. If you've been affected by crime or know someone who has, I hope this series helped you understand what to expect and what options are available. Justice takes strength, and no one should have to walk that road alone. For more information or resources, visit laffeybucci.com.